Okay. Um, so to get into it, I think really the best way to begin is just to frame why we're talking about the frontier firm and what that means in particular for manufacturing organizations, and also what it really means for manufacturers that wish to kind of lead with AI, and therefore they want to be more kind of intelligent in the decisions that they make, and then also in the way that they optimize their processes and even bring new products to market, or the products themselves. This should be really no surprise to anyone in this industry that we would be kind of advocating for this type of transformation. It's something that's been in the making for the better part of 20 years. And the really great thing is that we're at this inflection point where really we're beginning to completely accelerate much quicker than we ever have before. I'll be talking a little bit more about this as we go forward, and I'm also going to be spending some time talking through some of the practical examples as well as a few frameworks that you may be able to use in your own organization to help build the strategy and the plan for building your own frontier firm. Okay, so with that, what's on the menu card for today? Well, we'll spend about 40 minutes going through the slides, and then we'll be opening it for Q&A. First of all, we really kind of need to begin with what is the frontier firm. So we'll be talking about this. We'll take a few slides to kind of frame it for you. Then we'll jump into one of the digital strategies that we've been working with many of our customers to evolve and to develop, which we believe to be a very good kind of framework to understand what is kind of relevant to you now, but also what will be relevant to you in the future and how you build that foundation. Then, very practically, we'll talk about some of the more prominent use cases that we've been working on with our customers, and jump directly, of course, into the types of KPIs that they're driving towards, and also the different ways that they're using agents. Finally, what's probably most interesting to everybody is some just really practical examples, and so I'll be talking about those as well. I hope this will be a very fun session for you. Certainly fun for me to be here today in front of all of you as well. Okay, so something that I feel is really worth noting is just how far we've come in such a short period of time. So if you go all the way back to 1936, go back to the Turing machine, this is probably the first time that you heard these words, artificial intelligence. And so it's like quite a journey, isn't it, to go from sort of like 1936 to where we are. And so it's an incredible amount of transformation. But along the way, we can see there's been these very, if you like, impactful milestones that have occurred sort of just with the history of manufacturing itself. If we look at the 1950s, it was plastic injection molding. And why was that so important? Because it gave us repeatability and it gave us scale. But at the same time, it was one of those technologies that really did require instrumentation and understanding of the core data. Even if we were looking at kind of, analog, analog displays back in that day, we still had the data, and the data was very important to us. Through the 60s, then you begin to see a lot more computerization. And so the industry was really tracking with technology as it kind of grew up, sometimes in this industry and then sometimes in others. Manufacturing as an industry has been a really big adopter of technology. By the 1960s, we were into robotics. And then if you look forward to where we are now, robotics has a complete resurgence because of AI and what we can do with robotics. And you may have seen in the news most recently, there's a lot of humanoid robots, which a kind of pre-market or are almost coming there with many organizations, if you like, finding that there is a way to deliver that technology now because of AI, but then also because of some advancements in the core technologies themselves. By sort of the 1980s and then through the 1990s, we were putting more and more data together, and sort of like mixed or multimodal data. We're thinking more about sort of computer vision, or as we called it then as machine vision. We're sort of like slowly creeping forward to getting to where we are now, which is kind of this era of the Internet of Things, and also this era of predictive analytics, AI. And then if we get to where, sort of like the last few years, at least the last 1 or 2 years, we're really in this time of kind of the AI agent. And for us at Microsoft, this is kind of the co-pilot and its co-pilot agents. And we feel very good about this type of terminology because we've really from the beginning have said that this will be something which will augment kind of, augment people. It's something to augment human intelligence and to make us better in what we do, more productive in what we do, and being able to do more without losing, if you like, the human touch, because we're always there. But the things which are very robotic, those things which are very like information intensive, that would be very difficult for a person to do because of just the repetitiveness of it or because of the sheer scale of information that needs to be processed, then an AI agent is actually a very productive and very wise choice. And if you look really at kind of the fun metric behind this is that we had kind of this 86 years to get up to this point where we were like starting to really see AI come back again with generative AI. And then over the next 2 years, it's been an incredibly rapid evolution of the technology itself. And you can see this today in the investment that the hyperscalers like Microsoft, as an example, are putting into data centers. We're instrumenting over like a multi-year period in order to facilitate this. AI is here to stay. It's going to be the foundation of many organizations, and hence why we're really, really pushing hard for organizations to think about how they build the frontier firm and what that will mean to them. So fun to look at history for sure, and also really fun to look forward. So that's kind of here we are with the frontier firm, and what does it really mean? This is really our way of saying it's the organization that leads with AI. It's the decisions that you make which start with, could we do that with AI? Is it better with AI? Is this going to give us an advantage if we go with AI? Is it simply something that's going to free up time for me, or is it going to free up resources? It's that type of thinking that needs to be embedded and become intrinsic within the organization that's important. Sometimes this sort of thought process, if you like, this mindset, is what it takes to be frontier. That is the most important thing. Then the second most important thing is having the technology to make it come to light. So some organizations, if you kind of think about it, will go for the technology, but they won't have the mindset. And that's when we see it not reach its full potential, or where we see it end up as maybe more of a kind of smaller project for them, albeit it might be successful, but it doesn't reach that level of scale because the mindset is perhaps not there. This is why we spend quite a bit of time talking to executives in organizations, because their buy-in and their advocacy of becoming frontier is absolutely critical and very important. But really, for anybody in their day job, they can kind of begin there too. We've found often they can build the nucleus, is that it only takes a small amount of success to become almost viral in an organization, is that people tend to go with what they see as being successful. And so we don't always have to begin at like a very large scale. Sometimes we can just begin small and begin to take it from there. And often this can be very comfortable for an organization as well. It doesn't seem so dramatic, if you like, to the very next morning announce that you're going to become frontier, and then everybody in the organization is going to be doing something new with AI, but rather build it up in some areas of core competency and start there. Many organizations today have taken this journey, have begun this journey. Some of them have become frontier, and some of them are well on their way. Some are also just beginning their journey. But very importantly, they would say that they feel, a very high degree of confidence in the technology is going to help them with almost any of their business problems, one in particular being capacity. And we know today that one of the bigger challenges we have is actually resources. And it's a little bit sad that maybe it goes back to almost 1950, if we go back to kind of the original history slide there, that we didn't keep pace with things like, pay scales as an example. And so going into manufacturing has become less and less productive over time. It's almost become, the job of last resort sometimes for people to go to manufacturing. It's maybe in your small town, and so you feel compelled to go and work there. But are there people aspiring to go to manufacturing? That's really an open question. But we would argue that actually it's a very good reason to want to come back to manufacturing now, because these newer technologies provide people with a lot more scope within the organization to have an impact. It's no longer just being a highly skilled worker at a particular type of function, whether that be welding or operating that CNC machine or plastic injection molding. It's not just that anymore. It is now beginning to focus on the ways that those people can incorporate AI into their job and or use it in a way that the organization will be able to realize new levels of productivity or hitting others, some other type of manufacturing KPI. So it's, really, we should feel very confident about this technology, that we have groundswell. There are many organizations that are heading in this direction and they will not stop. All right, so one of my most favorite slides to talk about is this one. One of the reasons why is that, I felt as if it provides a very simple framework for thinking about building the frontier firm. And it actually goes a little bit beyond just leading with AI. It goes a little bit further than that, because we're really challenging and asking the question, where will you go in the future when there are these nascent technologies which will be available to you? That type of thinking, we believe, will influence what you're going to do now. It's a little bit of that, you need to know where you're going before you take the first step. That's nothing new for many people, but sometimes it gets forgotten because the temptation of technology to use it immediately and to try and get value from it immediately is extremely high. I think we all try to do that, but taking a moment to step back and ask the question, how far could we go with this, and how quickly can we track with the technology, or how planful can we be with the technology, is exactly the type of questions we want to ask and the type that we want to get an answer for today. Now, importantly, I always advocate revise your plan every year because the technology will evolve rapidly. You can see here, kind of starting at the end here, some of the more nascent technologies we have in the market at the moment are quantum computing. And they're getting quite the buzz at the moment because I think everybody understands that the potential is absolutely incredible for this technology. If nothing else, its simple speed to compute things which are very, very complicated is just incredibly attractive. It's 1,000x, 5,000x. It's incredibly enticing of a technology, and yet it's not quite there for everything that we want to do yet. But the question is, how do you get ready for it when it's there so you're not left behind? Because the first movers will get there and will get there very quickly. And that becomes a question of the types of technologies that you begin to adopt now and the types of investments you make, perhaps in simulators like a quantum simulator. But thinking more at the platform level, do I have the right type of platform that allows me to get to quantum when it's available? And indeed, if I have the right partner to help me get to quantum when it's available? That's a good question to ask because it may influence what you do in the more immediate term. So let's just go backwards one more. We'll go to kind of what is more near term, or what we believe to be near term, is actually the robotic workforce. And I think between robotics and quantum, I think many of these look like they come from the pages of a science fiction book, which I think we can all understand, and probably many of us have read those books too. And yet it's very, very practical. We're seeing humanoid robotics. Maybe they are fixed at a workstation today. They're not quite walking and talking, so to speak, but they're there and they are performing human function, perhaps where a person cannot perform that function, or it's dangerous, or it's repetitive and straining. The robots can do a very, very good job of this. And what makes them different is that AI gives them cognition. If they fumble something in an assembly process, they can look for it, find it, and go back to task. They can do this because they have new types of sensors and capabilities which are available to them through AI, so that they can hear things, they can see things, and then they can process and make decisions based on the criteria. Trying to program for that, if you've ever done any robotic program before, would be very, very difficult to get there. The number of conditions that you would have to consider would be perhaps almost unattainable. You may not even be able to get there. But because AI is a learning model, you can begin to incorporate all of these different types of circumstances so that your robotics is getting smarter and smarter. And this is why we really see this as being an opportunity for robotics to come forward. It's because of AI, actually. And, there is also motor control and everything, which has come, a long way from certainly where it was even 2 or 3 years ago. But all of it coming together is saying it is very practical to augment the workforce and or put these robots in places where humans should not be, or in jobs where humans also should not be. In many cases, we may see them next to a human. Just augmenting is another option, or one person orchestrating 10 or 20 robots as an example. Hold that thought, because that is very similar to how we feel about building AI agents. Then we've got what would you do next? And so in the light of trying to get to kind of these nascent technologies, I would be thinking more about simulators. In particular, I'd start to think about how we can scale up digital twin. Thankfully, not a new term, something we don't have to explain anymore. I think everybody understands this. If nothing else, it is kind of the congruence of real world data with kind of virtual data. Everybody, I think, has that sort of like that notion, but are they using it in a way which is, reaching its full and maximum potential? And I would say the answer is not quite yet. One of the reasons why is that the application of AI in these environments can be the sort of environment that you need to go train those robots, because it can consider the real world, but it can also, if you like, simulate many of these sensors in a way that you can train at scale, which is incredible unto itself. The other is just being able to predict different types of outcomes in a virtual world so that you can then replicate that in the physical world. And this works particularly well in like a warehouse circumstance, or it works really well when you're trying to queue inventory in a factory. It can work extremely well when you've got kind of logistics coming in and out of a warehouse. You're trying to coordinate this as an example. There are many examples where that sort of digital twin of a real world, when you're applying AI technologies to it, can help you understand all the different possibilities and outcomes before you make a decision. And then we get to what are we going to do now? The most important thing, what are we going to do now? To become frontier, we would say the first thing to do is look for all the processes that you could transform, that you've been thinking about doing for years, that could be 10 steps, 20 people. Now they can be 1 person, 5 steps. That's really where we would recommend focusing. Of course, there will be many other agents you can build which just help you in your day-to-day job. You ask the agent a question, it's already knowledgeable, it gives you the answer, you move on. This would be kind of step number 1. But we're always thinking more like what it would take to actually physically transform operations or some other aspect of the business. And that really would be thinking about the process itself, and that is absolutely critical. Now, behind this, or kind of a foundation for this, of course, is actually platform itself. And we really think about it in 3 ways. One is you have to be very considerate of security, safety, and privacy. You have to have a platform that will do this for you. And we're also very considerate of having the technology where you can run anywhere, anytime, and you've got always on performance is incredibly important. And that's that mixture of being able to say some things will run on premise because it makes sense, and some things will run in the cloud because it makes sense. And there are times when I'm going to mix them. If something on the edge is no longer operating, it is still operating in the cloud, then you have your real-time mitigation for uptime that you're looking for. You don't have the interruption to your operations. All of this is very practical and deliverable today. Really what this comes down to is kind of being very respectful of the data estate itself. Your AI is only as good as the data that you have in your organization and the data that you allow it to see outside of your organization. And then finally, really what we're talking about is having the right type of infrastructure that can be very adaptive. There are times when you need to flexibly change your infrastructure because your real world infrastructure has changed onto itself, whether it would be onboarding a new factory, or maybe it's moving things around in a line, or you're trying to increase the amount of capacity and so on. Having an adaptive cloud infrastructure is one way that you can accommodate this. Okay, so there was a lot there. It's my favorite. You can tell I could spend 2 hours on it. Thankfully today I did not, but we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about what that journey looks like to become agentic, kind of what you can be doing now. So the first thing that you can really be working on is building those assistants. And I work with many organizations where people are empowered to build them themselves. This is where having these no-code environments or having a low-code environment is going to absolutely shine, because everybody will naturally know what they could automate, or at least what they would be able to outsource to an agent. You kind of fundamentally know that because you're doing it maybe day in and day out. Maybe you only do it once a week, but it takes you 3 hours. That's a very good job for an agent. I use one called Researcher. I use this all the time. If I was going to give this to someone, it might take a week for them to turn it around, or at least a day or two. If I was going to do it, who knows, it might be 2 weeks before I can even get to it. My Researcher does it in just a number of minutes. It's that type of incredible productivity you simply cannot afford to ignore, and it almost becomes a little bit addictive in a way. You become very reliant on it once you realize how valuable it is. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. And we become very reliant on anything that helps us and anything that gives us speed, especially when we can then begin to focus more on the kind of upper level thinking that people have, rather than just trying to put information together in a way that's going to be usable for our particular task. So that's really where everybody can start. They can start here in kind of phase one. And many organizations choose to do this by enabling the citizen developer, sometimes is what they call them. Others just say AI for all, but making it available for the organization so that they can have that hands-on experience and they can begin to build the things which will work personally very well for them. Really, our phase two is more where the agents are now kind of like collaborating. They're not just assisting you in a single function, but more like they're working together. And this is where an agent may have a very specific task, but perhaps it requires another agent to complete its own task or provide its own information in order to complete the process itself. One way to think about this is that an agent can be there for every step in a process. Assuming that you don't transform the process, it's got 5 steps. You could make 5 agents for every step in the process. But agents can also accelerate. And so you don't always have to have the same process steps that you had today. You may be able to consolidate that down by 20, 30%, maybe even 50%, because the agent can be so much more capable. This is really kind of our phase two, our collaborators. This is maybe where we see more of the low-code type of agents being built, because we have orchestrators, and then we have to have some governance before we release them to the enterprise. It's kind of the phase two for organizations that are onboarding agentic and heading towards frontier. Final step here is our phase three is where we have orchestrators. This is different again. This is where we, instead of having kind of a one person operating multiple agents, but rather we have many people in the organization operating their agents. But at the same time, this is really where we do need to have really good governance in the company as well. Is that now we're thinking about agents as performing functions like people. They are becoming their own teams. You may have them in your organization chart as an example. It's a crazy idea that in your org chart would be an AI for a function, but believe me, I think it's going to be our future, because we will naturally want to understand how people work in the company and what they're responsible for. And if it's an AI, at least you know what it's going to do and it will be responsible for. And this is really where we think that the final phase for many organizations to become frontier is where their agents will be orchestrators. They're going to pull whole entire processes together. There will be maybe one or few people that will need to be involved in order for them to orchestrate. They will be there to cater to entire business processes. And the really great thing to think about is not just what it can mean inside your own organization, but rather what it can mean when you're orchestrating across organizations too, perhaps with your suppliers or perhaps with your OEMs or with your customers. It's a very, very practical application for AI agents in this particular case. Okay, so let's move on a little bit and just take a look at what it would mean if we were to put that into an organization and think about the major business functions of a company. So we kind of took it as, let's just start with one that would be kind of very manufacturing centric, kind of like your typical manufacturing company. So you would have a design function, You've got a procurement supply function. Of course, you've got operations where you're going to build. Then we've got sales function where obviously we're going to be taking it to the market. And then what happens when it goes into service or goes into sustainment. And really, the point of this diagram is that there will be many types of data sources that you will need to consider for each of these functions. But importantly, having that sort of data fabric is going to allow the information to be available to an agent when it needs it. So if it happens to be a design agent, if it happens to be something which is built into a platform from Siemens PTC or many other partners that we have, it can be considerate of information outside of its domain. And that could be very important if you're a designer and you're trying to make a supply chain choice. As an example, you will be thinking about specification, performance, mean time between failure. You'll be thinking about all of these, as well as there's going to be lead time, quantity, and so on. All of these factors will now be able to be considered by an agent. So if you're making a component choice, the agent can then consider, do you have any in inventory? What has been the relative failure rate of those? Can you get enough of them going forward on your product plan? It's such an exciting space because we have so much latitude in an agent to process the information and give you an answer that it's almost, to a degree, somewhat addictive in its own nature to want to go and build this. You build one, you want to build another one and another one, because it's doing so much for you. And these things are ordinarily quite difficult or laborious to put together. We represent many partners here that you see, but clearly not all of them. We just have a few examples, but we have an incredible partner ecosystem behind each of these functions, where there are maybe organizations you're working with today, as an example, or there are organizations you want to work with in the future. Microsoft has an incredible partner network, which is amazingly important to us. And one of our roles is to help them build their own agents into their products that work with our broader platform so that they can be exposed to information beyond their own domain and that they can do more for you. And really, ultimately, what we're saying is that amongst this entire ecosystem, you can build your own agents on top again, which gives you kind of the ultimate flexibility. So if you see something which maybe is not delivered by one of your partners today, but is an opportunity for you to create it in your organization, you have that empowerment to do so. So one of the other questions that is often asked of Microsoft, and I'm sure of any organization that's delivering AI today, is what type of use cases can I actually facilitate with this technology, and which ones are practical? And so when we start this exercise with any company, we're always thinking, what is the business problem that you're trying to solve first? And it seems really fundamental that we would do that. And it almost seems a little bit of, it's not rocket science. I mean, I think we should all know this. But sometimes it can be very tempting to just begin with the technology itself and say, oh, it looks like it actually matches this problem and I'll go after it. We try not to go there. We try to start with what is the most important thing that you're trying to solve at this moment for your function, for your team, for your role in the organization. We try to start there. And so what we've represented in blue are kind of the very common things that we've seen across each of these business functions. And then what you see below are all the different types of use cases which relate to all of those particular metrics. This we think is very foundational because any organization will want to prove that the investment in AI is actually worth it. There will be a return for their AI investment. Easy way to do that, you bake in the key performance indicator, you bake in the ROI from the beginning. And we're not shy of saying it just will be productivity. We will save minutes in a process. You don't need to have 8 contract workforce that's working on it anymore. You can bring it in-house because we can now. That could be very meaningful to you. Those other 8 contract workforce working on something else that can't be done with AI. That's a very productive use. We can make those decisions when we know that there is a key performance indicator behind it. And even the most simple ones will still yield a high result. Some of them will hit things like cash flow. Some of them will go directly in the finance space. Some of them will hit exactly cost and expenses. perhaps what would be a focus for an organization, they can be there and that they can show those savings. And many organizations we've worked with have gone directly there because they felt like that was probably the most important way for them to demonstrate value of AI. Others have said, I'm okay with starting with the call center. I'm okay doing that because I want 24/7 call center. It's difficult for me to run people around the world. People are kind of error prone. It's true. That's what makes us human. I don't want this to be error prone. I'm going to make this something which is going to be bulletproof every time. Call center works for me. And so everybody will make their own decisions based on where they believe value is going to be recognized the most in their organization. And one of our roles is to help map that out and then to also then start aligning what would be the high priority scenarios for them. Let's take a quick look at what organizations do when they follow this methodology and kind of where do they go and what do they achieve. And we've got some really great ones here from Bridgestone, focusing in specifically on operations where they have their own agents that have been delivered that will answer very specific, high precision questions about manufacturing operations. You can ask this agent a question which relates to yesterday's volume versus today's volume, and you can ask the question, why is there a difference? And that could be a difference in the manufacturing order and so therefore the plan, or it could be a difference in the fact that there was some downtime that was unexpected. There's all these types of questions which can be asked of an AI agent when it understands the manufacturing data model itself. And that's some of the work that we've been able to accomplish with a great partner like Avanade at Bridgestone, is building the manufacturing data model so that the AI understands that will be its language and that will be its world. That's why sometimes we have to have the AI very specific to a task. The thought that there can be the genie in the bottle that operates for the entire organization, I believe, is like a complete misnomer. You know, you can get there on some things like enterprise search, don't have that anymore. Sure, you can have an AI that does that for you, but on very specific business process, having a very dedicated AI is really the way to go. Let's take that example one step further with, say, Textron. Now we're thinking more in the kind of maintenance, repair, overhaul space. If you need to have that aircraft get back up in the air as quickly as possible because it's a revenue generator or because, you know, it's personal, so you need to be somewhere, then having a technician that can go through all the mountains of documentation and revisions and come up with the direct answer is accelerating the time that it takes in order to repair the aircraft. It's helping with the quality of the repair, the speed of the repair, and it's also helping some of the people which are maybe not as experienced as others get parity, which is an incredible use of AI in this particular case. Now we might be sort of more in the kind of operations space with Bimbo and with Celanese, but what's really important about these in particular is that they've taken a different approach. They've gone for, let's get the core information operating within our operations, and then let's begin to build process on top and use AI strategically where we can. For Celanese, it means being able to take the knowledge out, build documentation, put video against it, and start to create a whole new set of content that's available to anyone in their particular business process. For somebody like a group of Bimbo, as an example, it was really about being able to enable people to create their own process on top of manufacturing data, and then in turn be able to accelerate the process, and or transform process was most important for them. The really great thing is that with these type of platforms that are being built, then the world is now open for more AI than they have today. So they've started small, they've started where it was most important, but it's not as if they're now, restricted from going even further again. And we see that all the time, is just starting in one place and then seeing success and being able to grow it to another. I'm going to show you a few more things quickly here as we kind of get to our Q&A stage. This one I really love in a way because it kind of shows this mixture of the digital twin sort of virtualized world and the application of AI in a practical way that's helping this organization, a bottling company, be more efficient in their operations to increase their yield, increase their quality, and frankly, it's helping their people troubleshoot when there is a problem And I'm yet to be in any manufacturing organization that doesn't have a problem. In fact, any organization anywhere, there's always a problem. That's why we're there, is to go fix them. And these solutions really help people get there in a much faster way. This is the work that we have done with Sight Machine and NVIDIA as an example. And so, we're very big on bringing our partners together on the platform where it makes the most amount of sense for people like you, for our partners indeed as well. And then we can begin to accomplish these incredible things. Looking at this particular customer, having these AI-powered recommendations and then being able to map that to the real world onto itself was transformative. Being able to bring context to a particular type of knowledge or to a particular type of insight. Today, if you walk into any manufacturing organization, and maybe they're very advanced, they have a lot of dashboards and so on, these unto themselves are very useful, but if you're seeing it for the first time, do you have the right context? Do you know where that information is coming from physically? I mean, this is manufacturing as an example. Well, having this type of environment allows you to get there very, very quickly. And what you see is what you would expect in the real world. But importantly, an environment like this as well, it also facilitates things like troubleshooting. It does allow you to bring in improvement, and maybe that's just done through the software itself, or maybe there needs to be a change in the physical environment. All of that is now almost instantly available to anyone that has that particular job function. And you can do it from afar. You don't have to be there in order to do it, which is quite remarkable. So you can light up your workforce at global scale. That's another thing which makes this kind of environment incredibly powerful. And AI is taking it to the next level because it's bringing insights which ordinarily would have taken a long time to do, would have become probably stale over time. Things which are just very human in nature, it's now brought this kind of like real-time capabilities to bear. Now, talking about real-time capabilities, this is another one that I'm really very fond of. This is the work that we've been doing with Rescale and with Synopsys Ansys. I love this really because, if you've ever been in this type of role function before, you know what it takes to go through your design validation. You know what it takes to go through this initial phase. And quite often your bottleneck is compute. If you're running a simulation, then it's going to mean, many CPUs, many GPUs. It's going to take time, whether that's 5 minutes, 50 minutes, or 5 days. It's time that you could be doing something else. Probably you do something else, but you're not doing this particular job. You're not iterating on the design because it needs to go and process. Incredible thing about AI is that it can predict the outcome with incredibly high precision. So maybe what we do is we simulate and we process in high performance compute 1 or 2 times, and then we allow AI actually to predict what other scenarios would look like in a design of experiments. In this particular case, having an AI physics model helps us get there. It's a different type of model that we're applying. We're not thinking about just a simple OpenAI model as an example. We're now thinking about something that is custom built to the language and to the world of physics. And what we have been able to see here as an example is truly 1000x performance, because we're no longer simulating, we're now predicting an outcome, and we're getting there just within a minute or 2 or even less, sometimes even just a few seconds. So it's really not science fiction. This is really very practical. These are the real world results that we've seen with this particular approach. Now let's take it one step further, and this is where we have a short video. What you see in this video here is actually our Azure AI Foundry. So this is just a product available from us. And what we're doing is we're connecting our simulation data, we're applying a model to it, and then we're going to begin conversing with our simulation data. I have to tell you, as someone who's performed probably hundreds of simulations when I was an engineer many years ago, this is incredible. Being able to just ask the questions of the data and have it presented to you in a way which just makes sense for everybody because it's in a table or it just gives you an answer is absolutely remarkable. And you can see to get there was really very easy. We just needed to say the data source is simulation data. We're going to use this model, and then we're going to open a chat interface. We didn't build an application. We just went in and used one that was already there to begin to interrogate. Anyone in a design engineering function can take this into their own hands and start tomorrow. This is another way that the organizations can start to think about becoming frontier. It's like it's right there for the taking. It's something that you can do almost immediately and begin to see value. So where else could we go with this technology? Well, I like this one too, because it really speaks to the fact that sometimes having the expertise leave the organization is actually the biggest liability that we have. And I've seen it many, many times over. People just get to a point where they're going to retire and they leave with 20 years, 30 years maybe of like real experience in their head is gone. It leaves the organization. And so trying to bring this back into the company is really very difficult in traditional terms. We've tried internal wikis, we've tried, getting them to document things, we've tried all of these things, and to some degree that move the needle a little bit, but not like building an AI agent that's very specific to a function that understands all the knowledge that there is. That knowledge did not walk out the door with that person. That knowledge is here in the organization. And what Toyota have done here is an incredible job actually of building a multi-agent environment that allows anyone to go and begin asking questions and beginning to create queries very specific to their role function. But behind it, these agents are definitive experts. They know everything there is to know within the enterprise. Let's take a quick look at how that's architected. So this is a multi-agent environment. This is where Toyota has gone from kind of stage one, where we had assistants, to kind of into stage two. And what I really like about this is that each of them is backed by its own unique knowledge base. Like, let's take drivetrain. What does it take to be a drivetrain expert? There's got to be a lot of information behind this. For an engineer graduating, they have the knowledge. That has spent 5 years at university, they have the knowledge. But how do they retain and keep that knowledge, and then how do they start to learn from others? Having those knowledge sources in the enterprise is the way to do that. It's almost impossible for us to remember everything that we've learned over time, but having an agent that is always going to have that information is really quite incredible. And the type of thing that you see from here really is people being better at the job that they have. They make less mistakes. They can get through some of the decision-making processes they have in less time than they had before, because they're not constantly going back and referring to things or trying to find someone that can help them. They have these agents which are available to them. And the really interesting thing about this setup from Toyota actually is that they can begin to orchestrate between each of these agents as well. So if what you're trying to do requires you to understand drivetrain and suspension, the agents can work together in order to come up with that answer. You don't have to ask them individually. You can ask one question of which both agents will then come up with the answer. That to me is really quite remarkable. Now I'd like to show you one video before we close, and I think you'll enjoy this one. It's a very innovative approach to using AI. This is from organization Harting. They make connectors. They're the type of, high voltage, high ampage type of connectors. They do a lot of data sort of level connectors and so on. It's a really, really innovative organization. And they looked at this problem, it's kind of a unique, sort of like way of looking at a problem, and said, we're going to solve it with AI. And so let's take a look at what they went after and why, and then we'll wrap up our session today and look for some questions.
At Harting, we offer connectors used in a variety of industrial applications. Our customers are not necessarily connectivity experts, so we need an easier way for customers to find the products to fit their requirements.
If a connector has not been created yet, we also want to speed up the time for our engineers to create custom prototypes for our customers.
So, we build connectivity AI that integrates with Azure OpenAI service.
With our customer-facing agent, customers input their requirements and the agent searches Harting's extensive catalog. The agent translates these input into technical terms, helping customers to find quickly the right products that meet their requirements. The solution helps our customers to reduce the configuration time from an average of 15 to 20 minutes down to just 1 minute.
When a connector isn't in our catalog, our engineers can use our engineering companion. It is integrated with Siemens NX to create and visualize a customized connector in near real time. It used to take our engineers weeks to create a prototype of a custom connector. This can now be done in minutes. It helps us to streamline the configuration process, significantly reducing customers' decision times.
The partnership with Microsoft Cloud for Manufacturing and Siemens has helped us to deliver to our customers faster than ever before.
Quick recap for you. What's so innovative here is that Harting is using actually an engineering tool like Siemens NX in the background and combined with the simulation tools in order to come up with an answer for a customer in real time. So the customer is literally saying, I want a particular connector that can do this job and I'm looking for these attributes. And then if it's not in their catalog, it goes to NX, it models it, and it gives it back to the customer in near real time. I saw this prototype 2 years ago. Now it's been in production for a year. It's an incredible solution. It's a great way of thinking about AI. It's very specific to kind of their goals in order to increase their sales. It's also part of their overall commitment to their customer to provide them with a better quality product. Really exciting work. We have so much of it, we can't even fit it into 1 hour anymore. And so I certainly appreciate all of you hanging in there with us, and thank you once again for taking the time to join us. I'll just quickly put up my details for you. You're most welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you would like to learn more about Becoming Frontier, we would recommend that you take a look at our 2025 Work Trend Index, which has a plethora of information behind it which you might find useful. Jeffrey, with that, I think we can take a couple of questions. Yeah, we've got a few minutes remaining.
Yeah, great stuff. I appreciate it, Simon. I've got a few questions myself, but I'll go ahead and open the floor up to anybody that wants to come off of mute and ask Simon and the Microsoft team any questions that you might have.
So I have a question regarding the knowledge base and translate to agent to collaborate together. So as we know, data standardization and structure is very important for AI. What is your approach to people who want to use AI, even develop agents? Ask them to standardize the data, or if there's any tool that AI can transform unstructured data into structured data already out there.
So that's going to kind of depend on exactly where your data resides. We can certainly take this one offline and I can connect you with your Microsoft team to kind of go a little bit deeper on that. But you want to, it's going to completely depend on where you have your data sitting. Microsoft really recommends a place like Dataverse as opposed to having unstructured data sitting in a repository like SharePoint. That will certainly help with the indexing and will help with the responses. Are you already kind of playing around with some of Microsoft's AI tools today? Things like Copilot, Copilot Studio, and even Foundry. I know Simon showed Foundry earlier.
We have a Copilot, but we do not have Foundry. However, I do know we have some capability with Dataverse, just do not know how much it is.
Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to take offline of this conversation.
Yeah, let me reach out to your account team, and I'll have them reach out to you directly and work with you on that.
Thank you.
Markima, do you mind helping me take note of that? Sorry to ask you. No, but great question. That's a common question that we get. Any other questions?
Yeah. So Jeffrey, I add as quickly there that in some of the answer there is actually some of the work that we've done there with Bridgestone, and also the work that we've done with Sight Machine. So in both cases, we have very structured models behind them for manufacturing. So we run a manufacturing hierarchy. Effectively, it's the ISA 95 structure. So then the AI understands what is a work cell, what is an asset. It will understand all of these things intrinsically because it's embedded into the data itself. In other circumstances, we've seen people just create and train models that will work against their data because that's the way that they were going to get to success. There's probably any number of different approaches that we have to this. Some of them are just using the standard tools like you saw with AI Foundry and maybe going with a commercial model like GPT-4o. What it really does come down to at the end of the day is what we're trying to accomplish with the AI. That's really the kind of big learning that we have, is that before we can answer accurately, we almost need to say, what are you trying to accomplish? And then we could then provide the guidance as to what the approach would look like. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will look like any one of about 10 or 20 different things to get there, because there are choices when it comes to the approach.
Yeah, good follow-up. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really good question.
Any other questions before I kind of jump in with my own? All right, Simon, I know we've got 3 minutes left. How should leaders right now prepare their workforce for this new kind of shift towards an AI-centric operation? When we're talking about change management, a little bit more specifically, and workforce and culture, how should leaders start to think about that and prepare their workforce?
What we find is tried and proven is really leading from the top. And you wouldn't believe how powerful it is when an executive, the CEO of the organization, normally a great place to begin, when they can demonstrate to the organization how they use AI. It really does have that sort of, if you like, follow me effect, which is very useful. But then it's very incumbent on them to hold people accountable to finding their own success with AI. And the organizations that do that, we find, are the ones that kind of open it for use to everybody. But at the same time, they're not just leaving them alone. That they, maybe they have sort of like a weekly check-in point, or maybe it's a monthly check-in point. They give people the opportunity to come forward with their questions, and maybe they didn't get the result that they were looking for, but there is a way to get there. They just didn't know. That is actually very helpful. So there's kind of like 3 layers there. One is the executive support is, like, without question, the right way to go to get everybody very energized about, going to the technology, and also seeing that it's something that they can do. My CEO can do it, or my VP can do it. I can do it. It really does have that effect. Then there's this middle ground of the practical part. How do I overcome a challenge if I'm faced with one? I couldn't create the email alert I wanted to. Why is that? Very simple things sometimes block people, very easy to answer. Having that type of forum for people to go ask questions when you have some in-house expertise, that is incredibly valuable. That's really the middle ground. And then, really at the lowest level, I would say it's up to the individual. It's to begin to rethink the way that they work. I had a great one today, actually. We were talking about a new company that's in the kind of robotics space, and they're so new, no one really knows a whole lot about them. And the first inclination was, let's just go to the web and search their website. Mine was, I'm just going to go to my researcher agent and go there and ask it to tell me everything I need to know about that particular company. I want to know the competitors. I want to know its market potential. It's a mindset change. I thought, go to the agent. Some other people thought, I'll just go read their website. So some of that, the ground floor of it, is really is having that mindset change. How could I use an AI to do that job today rather than me doing it the way I've always done it?